She read every compromising word with that smile she absolutely hated. Kate realized she had crossed a line there was no coming back from. And now what? How could she look into the eyes of the man who knew her most forbidden desires? If this story touched your heart, hit that like button, subscribe, and let us know in the comments where you're listening from. And if you felt it was really worth your time, click the totally worth it button. Your support makes all the difference and helps us keep bringing you stories like this. The fluorescent lights of Morrison & Associates hummed their usual monotonous tune as Kate Henderson stared at her computer screen, the cursor blinking mockingly at the end of an unfinished sentence. The scent of stale coffee and printer ink filled the air, mixing with the faint cologne that always seemed to linger around Landon's desk, a reminder of his presence even when he wasn't there. She glanced at the clock. 6:47 p.m. Most of her colleagues had already escaped to their evening routines, leaving behind only the soft clicking of keyboards from the few dedicated souls still grinding away. Kate's fingers drummed against her desk, a nervous habit she'd developed since joining the competitive world of corporate consulting. Her phone buzzed beside her laptop, displaying a text from her best friend Sarah. So, how was the meeting with Mr. Impossible today? A smile tugged at Kate's lips as she thought about Sarah's nickname for Landon Mitchell, the man who had somehow managed to become both her greatest professional rival and her most persistent distraction. 3 cubicles away, she could see his dark hair barely visible above his monitor. His sleeves rolled up as he worked with that infuriating focus that made him so damn good at his job. Kate picked up her phone, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. Sarah had been her confidant through every workplace drama, every late-night vent session about impossible deadlines, and even more impossible colleagues. If anyone would understand the complicated mess of emotions swirling in Kate's chest, it would be her. She began typing, her fingers moving faster as the words poured out. "Girl, you have no idea what this man does to me. I spent the entire presentation trying not to stare at his hands when he was explaining the quarterly projections. And don't even get me started on how he looks in that navy suit. It should be illegal to look that good, while being so completely insufferable. I swear, sometimes I think about what it would be like if he just pushed me against the conference room wall and—" Kate's cheeks flushed as she continued typing, pouring out fantasies she'd never dared voice aloud. The empty office felt like a confessional, and Sarah's digital presence gave her the courage to be completely honest about the magnetic pull she felt toward Landon, despite their constant professional sparring. "And the way he argues with me during meetings? There's this intensity in his eyes that makes me wonder what that passion would look like in other situations. I know I shouldn't think about him like this. He's my competition, my rival. Probably thinks I'm just another obstacle in his path to the corner office. But God, Sarah, sometimes when he looks at me during those heated debates, I feel like he can see right through me. Like he knows exactly what effect he has on me, and he's enjoying every second of it." Her thumb hovered over the send button as she read through the message one more time. It was raw, honest, and completely unlike the composed professional image she maintained at work. But that's what best friends were for, right? To hear the messy, complicated truth. Without giving herself time to second-guess, Kate hit send. The message showed as delivered, and she leaned back in her chair with a sigh of relief. There was something cathartic about finally admitting what she'd been feeling, even if it was just to Sarah. The confession felt like releasing a breath she'd been holding for months, but as she glanced up from her phone, preparing to return to her presentation, Kate's blood turned to ice. The contact name at the top of her screen wasn't Sarah, it was Landon Mitchell. The phone slipped from her suddenly nerveless fingers, clattering onto the desk with a sound that seemed to echo through the quiet office like a gunshot. Kate's heart hammered against her ribs as she stared at the screen, willing the name to change, for reality to shift back to something manageable. But there it was, undeniable and devastating, delivered beneath her most intimate confession, sent directly to the man who was its subject. "No, no, no," she whispered, her hands shaking as she grabbed the phone. Maybe there was a way to unsend it, to delete it before he saw it. Her fingers flew across the screen, searching desperately for an option that didn't exist. The soft ding of an elevator arriving made her freeze. Through the glass partition, she could see Landon stepping out, a coffee cup in one hand and his phone in the other. He was looking down at the screen, his expression unreadable as he walked toward his desk. Kate's entire body went cold, then hot, then cold again, as she watched him stop mid-stride. His eyebrows raised slightly, and then, God help her, the corner of his mouth curved into what could only be described as an interested smile. Their eyes met across the office space, and Kate felt as though the air had been sucked from the room. Landon's gaze was steady, penetrating, and held something she'd never seen there before, something that made her stomach flip and her pulse race for entirely new reasons. He lifted his phone slightly, as if to indicate he'd received her message, and that small smile deepened. Then, with deliberate slowness, he settled into his chair and began typing a response. Kate couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but sit frozen in her chair, watching the man who now held her deepest secrets in the palm of his hand. Her phone buzzed. She looked down to see a notification from Landon, and her heart stopped entirely. But instead of the mortification or professional disaster she expected, there was just one line. "Interesting presentation strategy, Henderson. We should discuss this privately." The double meaning wasn't lost on her, and as Kate looked up to find Landon's eyes still fixed on her, she realized that everything between them had just changed irrevocably. And she had no idea whether that was the best thing that had ever happened to her, or the worst. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Morrison & Associates, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. Kate arrived 30 minutes earlier than usual, hoping to avoid the inevitable encounter that had kept her tossing and turning all night. Her reflection in the elevator's mirrored walls showed the evidence of her sleepless night, slightly smudged mascara that even concealer couldn't completely hide, and a tension in her shoulders that no amount of coffee could ease. The familiar scent of brewing coffee and fresh pastries from the lobby cafe usually comforted her, but today it only intensified the churning in her stomach. She'd rehearsed a dozen different approaches during her restless night: professional indifference, casual dismissal, even feigning temporary amnesia. But now, standing outside the elevator on the 15th floor, none of those strategies felt remotely feasible. Kate's heels clicked against the floor as she made her way to her desk, hyper-aware of every sound in the slowly filling office. The soft rustle of papers, the distant hum of the copy machine, the gentle whoosh of the ventilation system, everything seemed amplified, as if her mortification had heightened all her senses. She settled into her chair and immediately buried herself in her computer screen, fingers flying across the keyboard in a desperate attempt to appear completely absorbed in work. Maybe if she looked busy enough, professional enough, she could somehow will away the memory of last night's catastrophic mistake. But at exactly 8:15 a.m., Landon's usual arrival time, the elevator doors opened with their characteristic soft chime. Kate's typing faltered, though she refused to look up. She could feel his presence the moment he stepped onto the floor, that particular energy he carried that seemed to shift the very atmosphere of the room. Her peripheral vision caught the familiar silhouette of his tall frame, the confident stride that spoke of someone who owned every room he entered. "Morning, Kate." His voice was casual, but there was something underneath it, a note of amusement that made her cheeks flame instantly. She forced herself to look up, meeting his gaze with what she hoped was professional composure. "Good morning, Landon." But the moment their eyes connected, Kate knew her carefully constructed mask had crumbled. Landon's expression was unreadable, yet there was something dancing in those dark eyes, something that suggested he was enjoying this far more than any decent person should. "Sleep well?" he asked, settling into his chair with deliberate slowness. The question seemed innocent enough, but the way he said it, with that slight emphasis on "well," made Kate's heart skip erratically. "Fine, thank you," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. She turned back to her screen, but the words on her monitor might as well have been hieroglyphics for all the sense they made. The morning progressed with excruciating normalcy. Colleagues filtered in, meetings were scheduled, phones rang with their usual urgency. But underneath the veneer of routine, Kate was acutely aware of every movement Landon made. When he stood to retrieve documents from the printer, she could feel the heat of his presence as he passed her desk. When he laughed at something their colleague Mike said, the rich sound sent unexpected shivers down her spine. It was during the 10 a.m. team briefing that things became truly unbearable. The conference room was packed, everyone gathered around the long mahogany table to discuss the Patterson account. Kate had chosen a seat strategically positioned to avoid direct eye contact with Landon, but somehow, she was certain it wasn't coincidence, he ended up directly across from her. "Kate, would you mind presenting the market analysis?" their supervisor, Patricia, asked. Kate stood on slightly unsteady legs, grateful for the opportunity to focus on something concrete and professional. She moved to the front of the room, pulled up a presentation, and began discussing quarterly trends and consumer behavior patterns. She was halfway through explaining demographic shifts when she made the mistake of looking directly at her audience. Landon was leaning back in his chair, his pen twirling between his fingers with practiced ease. His attention seemed completely focused on her presentation, but there was something in his gaze that had nothing to do with market statistics. His eyes traveled slowly from her face down to where her hands gestured at the projection screen, and when they returned to meet hers, there was an intensity there that made her stumble over her next words. The consumer preference data shows," she faltered, her professional confidence wavering under his scrutiny. "Shows what, Kate?" Landon's voice was helpful, encouraging even, but that barely perceptible smile playing at the corners of his mouth told a different story entirely. Heat crept up her neck as she realized he was remembering specific lines from her message, the ones about watching his hands during presentations, about wondering what that focused intensity would look like in other contexts. "Shows a significant shift toward premium products," she finished weakly, her composure hanging by the thinnest of threads. "Interesting," Landon murmured, his eyes never leaving hers. Sometimes the most unexpected data can reveal surprising insights about consumer desire. The word desire hung in the air between them, and Kate was certain everyone in the room could hear her heart hammering against her ribs. But when she glanced around, their colleagues seemed oblivious to the charged undercurrent of their exchange, focused on taking notes and checking their phones. The meeting concluded without further incident, but as everyone filed out, Landon approached her with that same deliberate pace that had characterized all his movements today. "Excellent presentation," he said, close enough that she could catch the faint scent of his cologne, the same one that had distracted her yesterday evening. "Very revealing data." "Thank you," Kate replied stiffly, gathering her papers with hands that trembled slightly. "Kate." The way he said her name made her look up despite herself. "We should definitely discuss the Patterson strategy in more detail, perhaps somewhere more private." The suggestion was perfectly professional on the surface, but the way his eyes held hers, the slight pause before private, made it clear he wasn't talking about quarterly projections. "I'll check my calendar," she managed. "I'll be waiting," he replied, and there was something almost predatory in his smile as he turned to walk away. As Kate watched him go, she realized with a mixture of terror and anticipation that whatever game they were now playing, Landon was setting the rules, and she had absolutely no idea how to win. The Patterson project files spread across the conference room table like battle plans, each document a potential weapon in the corporate warfare that defined Morrison and Associates. Kate arrived 5 minutes early, hoping to claim the psychological advantage of choosing her seat, but Landon was already there, his jacket draped over the chair directly opposite hers. "Right on time," he said without looking up from the contracts he was reviewing, his voice carrying that same amused undertone that had become her personal torture device. The morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows cast sharp shadows across his face, emphasizing the strong line of his jaw and the way his dark hair fell slightly across his forehead. Kate forced herself to focus on the manila folders in her hands, instead of the way his fingers moved across the pages, those same hands she'd fantasized about in embarrassing detail just 2 nights ago. "I've prepared preliminary market research on Patterson's target demographics," she announced, settling into her chair with what she hoped looked like professional confidence. The leather squeaked softly beneath her, a sound that seemed unusually loud in the suddenly intimate space of the conference room. "Of course you have." Landon finally looked up, and that slow smile spread across his face like honey. "Always so thorough, aren't you, Kate?" The way he emphasized thorough made her stomach flip. Everything he said seemed to carry double meanings now, loaded with references to her mortifying confession. She opened her laptop with more force than necessary, the sharp click echoing off the glass walls. "Professional thoroughness is essential for client satisfaction," she replied coolly, proud of how steady her voice sounded. "Absolutely." Landon leaned back in his chair, studying her with an intensity that made her feel exposed despite her perfectly appropriate business attire. "Though I've found that the most interesting insights often come from unexpected approaches." Kate's fingers stilled on her keyboard. Unexpected approaches. He stood and walked to the whiteboard, picking up a marker with deliberate slowness. Sometimes the conventional strategy isn't what clients really need. Sometimes they're craving something more adventurous. As he began sketching out a project timeline, Kate found herself mesmerized by the movement of his shoulders beneath his crisp white shirt, the way his sleeve rode up slightly to reveal his forearm. She jerked her attention back to her screen, but not before Landon caught her staring. "Something distracting you?" he asked, not bothering to hide his amusement. "Just reviewing the quarterly projections," Kate lied, her cheeks warming. "Ah, yes. Numbers can be very stimulating." The way he said it made even the most mundane business terminology sound suggestive. "Shall we dive deeper into the analysis?" For the next hour, they worked in a tension so thick it was practically visible. Every interaction became a carefully choreographed dance of professional necessity and unspoken desire. When Landon needed to reach across her for a document, he moved just slowly enough that his sleeve brushed against her shoulder. When Kate stood to write on the whiteboard, she was acutely aware of how close he had to stand to read her handwriting. "Your consumer behavior analysis is particularly insightful," he commented, his voice coming from directly behind her as she explained a demographic chart. "You really understand what motivates people, don't you?" Kate's hand trembled slightly as she capped the marker. "Market research requires understanding psychology." "Psychology?" He repeated the word thoughtfully. "The study of human desires, needs, hidden motivations." He paused meaningfully. "What people really want, even when they don't admit it to themselves." She turned to face him and immediately regretted the decision. He was standing closer than necessary, close enough that she could see the small scar above his left eyebrow, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "People's motivations are usually quite straightforward," she managed, though her voice came out breathier than intended. "Are they?" His eyes searched hers with an intensity that made her pulse race. "I've found that people often surprise themselves with what they want, what they're willing to risk for it." The air between them crackled with electricity, and Kate realized they were no longer talking about market research. They were circling each other like predators, each comment a probe, each response a parry in an increasingly dangerous game. Her phone buzzed, breaking the spell. A text from Patricia. "Need Patterson preliminary report by 3 p.m. "Deadline pressure," Kate announced, grateful for the interruption. She moved back to her seat, putting the safety of the conference table between them. "Pressure can be motivating," Landon observed, returning to his chair. "Some people perform better under intense circumstances." "And others crack," Kate replied, trying to regain her professional footing. "True." His smile was predatory now. "But the interesting ones find ways to turn pressure into something more pleasurable." Kate's breath caught, and she knew he'd heard it by the satisfaction that flashed across his features. This was what he wanted, to see her composure slip, to watch her struggle between her professional obligations and the chemistry that sparked between them. Two could play this game. "You seem to have a lot of theories about performance under pressure," she said, leaning forward slightly. "Personal experience?" For the first time since this torturous dance began, Landon looked genuinely surprised. His eyebrows raised a fraction, and Kate felt a surge of satisfaction at catching him off guard. "I've found that the best strategies often involve patience," he recovered smoothly. "Building anticipation, making sure everyone involved is fully invested in the outcome." "Anticipation can be overrated," Kate countered, amazed at her own boldness. "Sometimes direct action is more effective." "Careful, Kate." His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "That sounds dangerously close to challenging me. Would that be a problem?" The question hung between them like a gauntlet thrown down. Landon's eyes darkened, and for a moment, Kate thought he might actually abandon all pretense of professionalism and cross the line they'd been dancing around. Instead, he gathered his papers with deliberate precision and stood. "This has been very productive," he said, his voice carefully neutral again. "We should definitely continue this collaboration. Frequently." As he moved toward the door, he paused beside her chair, leaning down just enough that his breath ghosted across her ear. "Sweet dreams tonight, Kate," he murmured, his voice so low only she could hear. "Try not to send any more interesting messages." And then he was gone, leaving Kate alone in the conference room with her racing heart and the unsettling realization that she was looking forward to tomorrow's inevitable encounter more than she should. The game was far from over, and Kate was no longer certain who was winning. The quarterly review meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. in the main boardroom, the glass-walled sanctuary where careers were built and destroyed with equal frequency. Kate arrived 15 minutes early, armed with printed reports, backup files on her tablet, and a carefully rehearsed presentation that she'd practiced until every inflection was perfect. What she hadn't prepared for was the seating arrangement. The room was already filling with senior partners and department heads when Patricia made the announcement that would derail Kate's carefully constructed composure. "Given the complexity of the Patterson account integration, I want Kate and Landon presenting as a unified team. You'll be sharing the front station." Kate's stomach dropped as she watched Landon's slow smile spread across his face. The front station was an intimate setup, 2 chairs positioned close together at a small table facing the room, designed to encourage collaboration but guaranteed to become her personal hell. "Wonderful," Landon murmured as he approached, carrying his laptop and a steaming cup of coffee that smelled like the expensive blend from the executive break room. "I do my best work in tight spaces." The words were perfectly appropriate for the professional setting, but the way his eyes lingered on her face as he said them made Kate's pulse quicken treacherously. As the room filled with the company's heavy hitters, men and women in impeccable suits who could determine her career trajectory with a single evaluation, Kate tried to focus on her breathing. She'd worked too hard to get here, sacrificed too many evenings and weekends to let her inconvenient attraction to Landon destroy her professional reputation. "Nervous?" Landon asked quietly as he settled into the chair beside her. The question might have seemed considerate to any observer, but Kate caught the hint of challenge in his voice. "Focused," she corrected, opening her laptop with deliberate calm. "Good." His chair creaked slightly as he leaned closer, ostensibly to review the documents spread between them. Focus is essential for peak performance. The familiar scent of his cologne, mixed with the subtle smell of expensive fabric softener from his shirt, created a sensory distraction that Kate struggled to ignore. She was hyper-aware of everything about him. The way his fingers drummed silently against the table, the soft sound of his breathing, the warmth radiating from his body in the air-conditioned room. Patricia called the meeting to order, and Kate straightened in her chair, grateful for the opportunity to focus on something concrete and measurable. She launched into her presentation with practiced confidence, discussing market analysis and demographic trends with the authority that had earned her recognition as one of the firm's rising stars. But 10 minutes into her presentation, Landon shifted in his chair to point at a specific chart on her laptop screen, and suddenly his shoulder was pressed against hers. "If I may add some context to Kate's excellent analysis," he interjected smoothly, his voice pitched to carry across the room while his proximity sent Kate's concentration spiraling. His arm brushed against hers as he gestured toward the projection screen, and Kate felt heat bloom across her skin despite the professional setting. She tried to shift away slightly, but there was nowhere to go without making her discomfort obvious to the room full of observers. "The consumer behavior patterns Kate identified align perfectly with our strategic recommendations," Landon continued, and now his hand rested on the table mere inches from hers. "The key is understanding what drives these impulses, what makes people act on desires they might otherwise resist." Kate's breath caught at the subtle emphasis on desires, and she saw Patricia nod approvingly, completely oblivious to the underlying current of tension crackling between her two presenters. "Mr. Mitchell raises an excellent point," Patricia said. "Kate, can you walk us through how these patterns translate to actionable marketing strategies?" Kate managed to find her voice and continue the presentation, But every time she glanced at her notes, she was aware of Landon's eyes on her profile. When she reached for her water glass, his fingers accidentally brushed against her wrist, sending a jolt of electricity up her arm that she prayed wasn't visible to their audience. The torture reached its peak when they moved to the detailed financial projections. Landon leaned closer to read from her screen, his shoulder now pressed firmly against hers, his breath warm against her ear as he spoke. "These numbers are impressive," he murmured, his voice pitched low enough that only she could hear. "Very stimulating projections." Kate's hand trembled slightly as she clicked to the next slide, and she saw Landon notice the subtle shake. His satisfaction was almost tangible, a predatory awareness that he was affecting her despite her best efforts to remain professional. "The integration timeline is particularly ambitious," he continued, speaking to the room now but maintaining his proximity to Kate. "It requires careful coordination between all parties involved. Very intimate collaboration." Senior partner Robert Chen nodded thoughtfully. "Excellent presentation, both of you. The chemistry between your approaches is exactly what we need for the Patterson account." If only he knew, Kate thought desperately, fighting to keep her expression neutral as Landon's quiet chuckle vibrated through her awareness. As the meeting concluded and participants began filtering out, Kate started gathering her materials with hands that she willed to remain steady. But Landon remained seated beside her, making no move to leave. "That went well," he said conversationally, though his voice carried that familiar undertone of amusement. "We work very well together, don't we?" "We're both professionals," Kate replied carefully, finally managing to put some distance between them as she stood. "Of course." Landon rose as well, moving to help her gather the scattered documents. Their fingers touched when they both reached for the same folder, and instead of pulling away, he let the contact linger. "Though I have to say there were moments when I could feel your enthusiasm for the project." Kate's cheeks flamed, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. "My enthusiasm is always for delivering excellent results." "Naturally." His smile was slow and knowing. "Though I couldn't help but notice you seemed a bit breathless during the financial section. The numbers must have been very exciting." "The numbers were comprehensive," Kate replied stiffly, though her pulse was racing again at his proximity. "They were indeed." Landon stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "Just like someone else I know." Before Kate could formulate a response, he stepped back, collecting his laptop with casual efficiency. "Same time tomorrow for the follow-up strategy session?" he asked, his tone perfectly professional again. Kate nodded, not trusting her voice. "Excellent." Landon paused at the doorway, turning back with that devastating smile. "I'll make sure to arrive early. I find our close collaboration very productive." As he walked away, Kate slumped back into her chair, her professional composure finally cracking. The man was going to be the death of her career, her sanity, or both. And the most terrifying part was that she was starting not to care. Kate's phone sat on the kitchen counter like an unexploded bomb, its black screen reflecting the soft glow of her laptop as she tried to work from home. She'd taken refuge in her apartment after yesterday's torturous meeting, claiming she needed uninterrupted time to finalize the Patterson proposals, but the truth was simpler and more pathetic. She needed space from Landon's intoxicating presence. The familiar ping of an incoming message made her freeze, her wineglass halfway to her lips. She'd been checking her phone obsessively all evening, dreading and anticipating contact from him in equal measure. The notification showed his name, and Kate's heart performed an unwelcome somersault. "Hope you're having a productive evening. I've been thinking about our collaboration." Kate stared at the message, her pulse quickening at the deliberate pause before collaboration. Everything he said seemed designed to keep her off balance, to blur the lines between professional necessity and something far more dangerous. She set down her wine and picked up the phone, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. The smart thing would be to respond with cool professionalism, to pretend she didn't understand his double meanings, but the wine had loosened her inhibitions, and the memory of his proximity during yesterday's presentation was making her reckless. "Productive is one way to describe it," she typed, then deleted, too revealing. "Just reviewing the quarterly projections," she tried next, then deleted that too. Too boring. Finally, she settled on, "The Patterson account requires thorough attention to detail." She hit send before she could second-guess herself, then immediately regretted her word choice. Thorough and attention sounded suggestive even to her own ears, especially given the context of their recent interactions. His response came within minutes. "Couldn't agree more, though I find myself distracted by certain unexpected developments in the project scope." Kate's breath caught. He was referencing her original message, the confession she'd sent by mistake that had started this entire dance of innuendo and barely contained tension. The bastard was enjoying this, drawing out her embarrassment and attraction in equal measure. "Professional focus is essential," she replied, trying to steer the conversation back to safer territory. "Absolutely, though I've discovered that personal investment can significantly enhance professional results." Kate set down her phone and walked to the window, staring out at the city lights as she processed his words. Personal investment. He was being deliberately ambiguous, creating plausible deniability while making his meaning crystal clear. Her phone buzzed again. "I've been reviewing your demographic analysis. Very insightful understanding of human psychology. Market research requires understanding motivation," she replied, echoing their earlier conversation. "True, though your particular insights suggest a very intimate understanding of what drives people's behavior." Kate's cheeks flamed as she realized he was subtly referencing specific parts of her accidental confession, the parts where she'd analyzed her own attraction to him with embarrassing psychological precision. "Experience informs analysis," she typed, then immediately wanted to throw her phone across the room. Why did everything she said to him sound loaded with subtext? "Experience is invaluable," came his quick response. "Though I suspect your most interesting insights come from personal observation rather than textbook theory." He was definitely talking about her confession now, about how she'd admitted to watching him during meetings, analyzing his every gesture and expression. The memory made her stomach flip with a mixture of mortification and excitement. "Observation is a critical research tool," she managed to reply. "It is indeed. I've been doing quite a bit of observation myself lately." Kate nearly dropped her phone. The implication was clear. He'd been watching her, studying her reactions, probably enjoying every moment of discomfort he caused. "Professional observation, I assume," she typed, her hands trembling slightly. "Naturally. Though I have to admit, some of the most fascinating behaviors occur when people think they're not being watched." Kate's pulse raced. How many meetings had he noticed her staring? How many times had he caught expressions she thought she'd hidden? "Professional behavior is consistent regardless of the audience," she replied, trying to sound confident. "Ideally, yes, but we all have moments of vulnerability. Moments when our true intentions show through." Kate walked back to the couch, picking up her wineglass with hands that weren't entirely steady. He was playing with her, drawing out admissions she didn't intend to make, forcing her to acknowledge the tension that crackled between them. "Professionalism requires self-control," she responded. "Yes, it does. Though I wonder, what happens when that control slips, when someone acts impulsively?" The reference to her original message was clear, and Kate felt a wave of heat wash over her face. He was reminding her that she'd already lost control once, already revealed exactly what she thought of him in embarrassing detail. "Impulses can be educational," she typed, surprised by her own boldness. "They can indeed, especially when they reveal truths someone was trying to hide." Kate swallowed hard, realizing that somehow the conversation had become a mutual confession, an indirect admission that the attraction was reciprocal. "Some truths are better kept private," she replied. "Are they? Or do some truths become more powerful when shared?" The question hung between them across the digital distance, loaded with dangerous possibilities. Kate stared at the screen, her heart pounding as she considered how to respond. Her phone buzzed once more. "Sleep well tonight, Kate. Dream about financial projections." The double meaning wasn't lost on her, and as Kate looked at the message, she realized that the line between professional and personal had been irrevocably crossed. And she was no longer sure she wanted to go back. The chatter in the executive break room stopped abruptly when Kate entered to get her morning coffee. Three colleagues who had been talking animatedly seconds before suddenly found extraordinary fascination in their mugs, their phones, anything that wasn't her face. The awkward silence hung in the air like toxic smoke, and Kate felt that familiar sensation of being watched that had become her constant companion over the past few weeks. "Good morning," she said in the most natural voice she could muster, heading toward the espresso machine. The sound of her heels against the marble floor echoed too loudly in the suddenly quiet space. "Morning, Kate," Jennifer from accounting mumbled, but her eyes avoided making direct contact. The other two women murmured similar greetings before quickly exiting, leaving Kate alone with her growing paranoia. As she waited for her coffee to brew, fragments of conversations from the past few days began forming a disturbing pattern in her mind. The way Mike from marketing had stopped talking when she approached his desk, how Patricia had given her that searching look during yesterday's meeting, the way conversations seemed to cease when she entered a room. The rich aroma of espresso usually calmed her, but this morning it only intensified the growing nausea in her stomach. She'd been so careful, so professional in her public interactions with Landon, but apparently not careful enough. "Kate," Landon's voice behind her made her jump, coffee nearly spilling onto her white silk blouse. "Jesus, Landon," she breathed, turning to face him. "You scared me." He was leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, wearing that unreadable expression that had become his trademark in their interactions. But there was something different today, a tension in his jaw that suggested he too had noticed the shift in the office atmosphere. "We need to talk," he said quietly, glancing over her shoulder to ensure they were alone. "About what?" Kate asked, though her racing heart already knew the answer. "About the fact that we're apparently the morning entertainment for the entire office." Kate's stomach sank. "What did you hear?" Landon moved closer, lowering his voice to a murmur that only she could hear. "Jennifer was speculating about our special chemistry during the Patterson presentation. Mike mentioned he's noticed you two whispering secrets during meetings, and Sarah from reception apparently has theories about why we always leave the office at the same time." "Shit," Kate whispered, leaning against the counter. "That's one word for it," Landon agreed dryly. Kate ran her hand through her hair, her mind racing through the implications. Morrison and Associates had a strict policy about office relationships. Not that there was a relationship to worry about, technically, but perceptions could be just as destructive as reality in the ruthless corporate world. "This is a disaster," she murmured. "I've worked too hard to build my reputation here. If people think I'm sleeping with you to advance my career—" "Who said anything about sleeping with me?" Landon interrupted, but there was an amused glint in his eyes that made her want to punch him. "It's not funny," Kate hissed. "You know how this works. If there are rumors about us, my credibility will be questioned. Every promotion, every successful project will be attributed to personal favoritism." The amusement faded from Landon's face, replaced by something more serious. "Kate, you're one of the most talented consultants in this company. Anyone who knows your work knows that—" "Knows what?" a new voice interrupted. Patricia appeared in the doorway, her intelligent eyes moving between them with unmistakable interest. "Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt a private conversation." "It's not private," Kate said quickly, hating how defensive she sounded. "We were just discussing the Patterson strategy." "Ah." Patricia's smile didn't reach her eyes. The Patterson strategy, of course. An awkward silence filled the small break room, and Kate could practically see the gears turning in Patricia's head. Her supervisor was known for her sharp intelligence and her ability to read situations, two qualities that made her excellent at her job and terrible for Kate's personal life right now. "Well," Patricia said finally, "perhaps you two can continue discussing this strategy in my office. Say 15 minutes. It wasn't a request. Kate nodded, feeling bile rise in her throat. "Of course, we'll be there." Patricia left and Kate turned to Landon with growing panic. "She knows. God, she definitely knows." "Knows what exactly?" Landon asked, his voice carefully controlled. "That you accidentally sent a message to my phone. That we have chemistry during presentations. That we tease each other a bit. That I'm completely, desperately attracted to you and apparently can't hide it to save my career," Kate exploded, then immediately regretted the words the moment they left her mouth. Landon went very quiet, his dark eyes studying her face with an intensity that made her want to hide. "Kate, don't," she said quickly, grabbing her coffee and heading for the door. "Let's just handle this with Patricia and then get back to work. Pretend none of this is happening." But as she walked through the corridors toward Patricia's office, Kate could feel Landon's eyes on her back, and she knew that pretending nothing was happening was becoming an impossible task, especially when every fiber of her being was screaming that she wanted something to happen. In Patricia's office, they sat in chairs that seemed strategically positioned for maximum discomfort. Patricia studied them for a long moment, her hands clasped on the desk. "So," she said finally, "do you two want to explain to me why the entire office is speculating about your personal life?" Kate felt all the blood drain from her face. Beside her, Landon remained perfectly calm, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "Patricia," Kate began, "any speculation is completely unfounded. Our interaction has been strictly professional." "Kate." Patricia's voice was gentle but firm. "I've been your supervisor for 3 years. I know how you behave professionally. And whatever this intensity is between you two, it's not strictly professional." Kate's heart sank, but before she could respond, Landon spoke. "You're right," he said simply. "There are complications, but I can assure you it hasn't affected our work or professional judgment." Patricia studied them for another long moment. "Maybe not yet, but appearances matter in this business. And right now, appearances suggest that something is going on between the two leading candidates for the senior promotion." Kate felt the world tilt beneath her. The senior promotion, the position she'd worked years for, the opportunity that would define her career. And now it was at risk because of a misdirected message and her inability to control her feelings for the man sitting beside her. The silence in Patricia's office stretched like a wire about to snap. Kate felt every heartbeat echoing in her ears as her supervisor's words reverberated through the room. Senior promotion. The position she'd pursued relentlessly for 3 years, now threatened by her inability to keep her emotions in check. "I'm going to be direct with you both," Patricia continued, her eyes moving between Kate and Landon with surgical precision. "You're both exceptional candidates for the senior position, but this situation complicates things." Kate opened her mouth to protest, but Patricia raised her hand. "I'm giving you 1 week to sort this out. Whatever this tension is, this chemistry, this attraction, it needs to be addressed professionally. Because I can't promote someone whose personal life has become office entertainment." When they left Patricia's office 15 minutes later, Kate felt like she'd been hit by a truck. Her steps were mechanical as she walked through the corridors, vaguely aware of Landon beside her, of the way colleagues avoided eye contact, of the whispers that seemed to follow them like shadows. "Kate." Landon's voice was low, urgent. "We need to talk. Really talk this time." "There's nothing to talk about," she replied automatically, but even to her own ears it sounded hollow. "We just need to keep our distance, be professional." "Kate." He stopped abruptly in the hallway, forcing her to turn and face him. "Do you really believe this is just going to disappear?" "It has to disappear," she whispered desperately. "My career, my reputation, everything I've worked for." "Conference room 3, he interrupted. "Now." It wasn't a request, and something in the intensity of his voice made her follow without arguing. The smaller conference room was rarely used, tucked away at the end of the corridor with glass walls that offered the illusion of privacy while maintaining enough visibility for corporate propriety. Landon closed the door behind them and turned to face her, and Kate was struck by the sudden realization that she'd never seen him like this. There was something different in his posture, a vulnerability he'd kept carefully hidden during all their teasing and games. "You want to know the truth," he said, his voice lower than she'd ever heard it. "The whole truth?" Kate swallowed hard. "Landon, I knew." The words came out like a forced confession. "About the message." From the very first moment, the world seemed to tilt beneath Kate's feet. "What?" "The message you sent by mistake." He made air quotes, his eyes never leaving her face. "It wasn't a mistake, Kate. At least, not completely. I don't understand." But even as she said it, something in the back of her mind began to stir, a terrible suspicion taking shape. Landon ran his hand through his hair, destroying his usual composure. "Sarah gave me your number months ago. For a work emergency, she said. But on your phone you have me saved right below her contact. Kate, when you were typing S for Sarah, my name came up first in the suggestions. The room spun. Kate leaned against the conference table, her knees suddenly unreliable. You're saying that I subconsciously... I'm saying that part of you wanted me to see that message, he said gently. And I teased you afterward because I wanted you to know you weren't alone in this madness. Kate looked at him, really looked, and saw something she'd missed through weeks of teasing and games, genuine vulnerability, uncertainty, and something that looked suspiciously like fear. You're telling me, she said slowly, that this whole time you knew I'd sent that message because I unconsciously wanted you to see it. Not just that. Landon took a step closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. I'm saying I spent months watching you during meetings, fantasizing about those heated arguments turning into something more. I'm saying when I read that message, it wasn't shocking, it was a relief. Kate's heart was beating so hard, she was sure he could hear it. Relief. Relief to find out I wasn't the only one losing my mind over this thing between us. His eyes searched hers. Kate, do you think I normally behave like this? That I spend my time teasing colleagues and playing these games? Kate shook her head silently. I don't. I never have. You drive me crazy in ways I can't explain or control. He laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. I want to know why I always arrive early to meetings, why I always stand too close during presentations. Why? The word came out as a whisper, because it's the only way I can justify being near you without looking completely insane. He took another step, now so close she could see the golden flecks in his dark eyes. Because every time you argue with me, every time you lift your chin in that defiant way, I want to kiss you, until you forget every single argument. The confession hung between them like a lit match in a room full of gasoline. Kate felt like she couldn't breathe, like all the oxygen had been sucked from the room. Landon, she whispered, we can't. Why can't we? His voice was intense, desperate. Why can't we? Because of company policy, because of gossip, or because you're scared of what might happen if you stopped fighting this? The question hit her like a physical blow because she knew what the real answer was. It wasn't company policy or gossip, or even her career that terrified her. It was the intensity of what she felt for him. It was the way he could destroy all her carefully constructed composure with a single look. It was the fact that for the first time in her life, she'd found someone who challenged her intellectually, emotionally, and physically, and it scared her completely. Kate! Landon raised his hand, his fingers barely brushing her cheek. I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But pretending this doesn't exist isn't going to make it go away. She leaned into his touch despite herself, her eyes closing for a moment. When she opened them again, Landon was studying her face with an intensity that made her feel both exposed and protected. What do we do now? She whispered. Now, he said, his voice rough with emotion. We stop pretending this is something we can control. And for the first time since it all began, Kate allowed herself to consider the terrifying and thrilling possibility of stopping her fight against what she felt, of allowing herself to want. The 3 days following Landon's confession passed in a strange fog of professional hypervigilance and barely contained sexual tension. Kate arrived at the office 15 minutes after him and left 15 minutes before, a carefully choreographed dance to minimize their interactions while maximizing their productivity. On the surface, it seemed they'd returned to the strict professionalism Patricia had demanded. But beneath the surface, everything had changed. Every email Landon sent carried undertones that made Kate's heart race. Every meeting became a minefield of stolen glances and electric tension. When their hands accidentally touched while reaching for documents, the contact burned through her like liquid fire, leaving her dizzy and desperate for more. The breaking point came on a Thursday, when Patricia announced that Kate and Landon would need to work late to finalize the Patterson proposal for an unexpected presentation Friday morning. The client moved up the timeline, Patricia explained, either ignoring or not noticing the way Kate and Landon carefully avoided eye contact. You two will have to stay until you get it done. We don't have a choice. Kate felt a mixture of terror and anticipation coil in her stomach. Hours alone with Landon, working in forced proximity, trying to maintain the veneer of professionalism that had grown more fragile with each passing day. "Of course," she managed to say, "that's not a problem." By 7 p.m., the office was nearly empty. The automatic lights had dimmed in the unused areas, creating pockets of shadow that made the familiar space feel intimate and unfamiliar. Kate could hear the distant sound of cleaning staff on the lower floors, the low hum of the air conditioning, and, louder than everything, her own quickened breathing. "We need to go through these numbers one more time," Landon said, his voice carefully neutral as he spread spreadsheets across the conference table. He'd removed his jacket hours ago, rolled up his sleeves, and Kate struggled not to stare at the way his shirt fabric stretched across his shoulders. "The numbers are correct," Kate replied, forcing herself to focus on her laptop screen. "I've checked them 3 times. "Then let's review the presentation once more." They'd reviewed the presentation 4 times. They both knew it was perfect. But neither was ready to admit there was no more real work to be done, that the only reason to stay was the torturous proximity neither seemed able to break. Kate stood to get water from the small refrigerator in the corner of the room, aware of Landon's eyes following her every movement. When she turned around, he was standing too, pretending to study something in the window that looked out over the city lights. "Kate," his voice was strained, "this isn't working." "What isn't working?" she asked, though she knew exactly what he meant. "This. Us pretending it doesn't exist. Acting like we can just turn off what we feel." Kate set down her water bottle with hands that weren't entirely steady. "We have to make it work. My career—" "Screw your career," Landon said suddenly, turning to face her with an intensity that made her step back. "Sorry, I didn't mean—" "Shit." He ran his hands through his hair, destroying his usual composure. "Kate, look at us. Look at what we're doing to ourselves. Do you think this is sustainable? Do you think we can keep pretending indefinitely?" "I don't know," she whispered honestly. "I just know I can't lose everything I've worked for. What if you didn't have to lose it?" Landon took a step toward her, his hands extended as if he wanted to touch her but didn't dare. "What if there was a way?" "What way?" Kate asked, hating the hope she could hear in her own voice. "We're discreet. Completely discreet. No one at the office knows. We keep this private." Kate looked at him, at the vulnerability in his eyes, at the way his hands trembled slightly. "Landon, you're talking about a secret relationship. Do you know how that sounds?" "It sounds like a solution," he said simply. "It sounds like 2 people who care about each other finding a way to be together without destroying their careers. What if someone finds out? Then we deal with it when it happens." His voice was firm now, decided. "But Kate, I can't keep pretending I don't want you. I can't keep acting like every minute away from you isn't torture." Kate's heart was beating so hard, she was surprised he couldn't hear it. "Landon, I know it's a risk," he continued, taking another step closer. "I know it's complicated and dangerous and potentially disastrous, but you know what's more dangerous? Living with regret. Spending the rest of our lives wondering what if." Kate could feel her resolve cracking like ice under pressure. All the sensible reasons she'd built up, all the careful precautions, seemed insignificant compared to the way he was looking at her in this moment. "If we do this," she said slowly, "we have to set rules, clear boundaries." Hope flashed in Landon's eyes. "Any rules you want. At the office we're strictly professional. Not an extra glance, not an accidental touch, nothing that could give people reason to suspect." "Agreed. No one can know. Not friends, not family, no one." "Absolutely." Kate took a deep breath, knowing she was about to cross a line from which there was no return. "And if this becomes a problem, if it starts affecting our work or our careers, we stop. Immediately, no discussion." Landon nodded, but there was something in his eyes that suggested he didn't believe it would be that simple. "I agree to your terms." The silence stretched between them, loaded with possibilities and dangers in equal measure. Kate could hear the sound of her own heartbeat, the distant hum of city traffic below, the exact moment when her carefully controlled life was about to become wonderfully, terrifyingly complicated. "So," she whispered, "what happens now?" Landon smiled, and for the first time in days, it was genuine, and not loaded with frustration or barely contained desire. "Now, Kate Henderson, we stop fighting this. And when he finally crossed the distance between them, Kate realized that some battles were sweeter when you allowed yourself to lose them. The grand ballroom of the Metropolitan Hotel sparkled under crystal chandeliers, transformed for Morrison and Associates' annual gala into a world of corporate elegance and calculated networking. Kate adjusted the neckline of her black dress, an elegant number she'd chosen specifically for its professional appearance, but which, she'd realized too late, accentuated her curves in a way that made Landon's eyes darken dangerously. They'd arrived separately, of course. In the 3 weeks since establishing the rules of their secret relationship, they'd become masters in the art of public distance. Kate had arrived with Jennifer from accounting, while Landon had shown up with Mike and some colleagues from marketing. To any casual observer, they were simply professional colleagues enjoying a corporate evening. But Kate could feel Landon's every movement across the crowded ballroom as if they were connected by an invisible wire. When he laughed at something a client said, she felt the laughter resonate through her own chest. When he moved to the bar, she had to resist the urge to follow him. And when their eyes met accidentally across the crowd, the heat that passed between them was so intense, she was surprised it wasn't literally visible. "Kate, you seem distracted," Patricia observed, appearing beside her with 2 champagne flutes. "Everything okay?" "Perfect," Kate replied quickly, accepting the drink gratefully. "Just admiring how beautiful the event looks this year." "It really does." Patricia followed Kate's gaze across the ballroom, and Kate prayed it wasn't obvious she was watching Landon chat with a group of important clients. "By the way, I need to congratulate you on the Patterson presentation. The client feedback was exceptional." "Thank you, it really was a team effort." Kate forced herself to focus on the conversation, away from how Landon's tuxedo highlighted the line of his shoulders. "Yes, you and Landon work very well together," Patricia said casually, but there was something in her tone that put Kate on alert. "Your professional chemistry is remarkable." Kate nearly choked on her champagne. "We respect each other's work." "Of course you do." Patricia smiled, but her eyes remained analytical. "Well, whatever the secret is, keep it up. Your partnership is producing exceptional results." When Patricia moved away to greet other guests, Kate released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. She needed air, a moment to compose herself away from watching eyes and subtext-laden conversations. She headed for the terrace, an elegant extension that overlooked the city lights. The night air was cool against her heated skin, and she leaned against the marble balustrade, finally allowing herself to relax. Escaping the crowd? Landon's voice behind her made her turn. He stood in the terrace doorway, his tuxedo impeccable but something in his posture suggesting the same tension she felt. Behind him, through the glass doors, she could see the party continuing, but out here they were relatively alone. "I needed air," she said, aware of how breathless her voice sounded. Landon approached slowly, his hands in his pockets, as if he didn't trust himself not to touch her. "You look beautiful tonight." The simple compliment hit her like a physical blow. In the 3 weeks of their secret relationship, they'd become experts at coded communication, stolen glances, and accidental touches. But here, in the semi-darkness of the terrace, his words carried a weight that made her heart race. "Landon," she whispered, "we can't be out here together. If someone sees us..." "I know." He stopped just a few steps away, close enough that she could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands clenched into fists. "But Kate, this is killing me. Watching you all night, not being able to touch you, to really talk to you. Those were the rules we established," Kate reminded him, though her own resolve was crumbling with each second. "Screw the rules," Landon said suddenly, his composure finally cracking. "Kate, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending." "You have to pretend," she whispered desperately. "We both have to pretend." "Why?" His voice was full of frustration. "Why do we have to hide this? Why do we have to pretend we don't care about each other? Because that's how we protect our careers. That's how..." "Our careers?" Landon laughed bitterly. "Kate, look at us. Look at what we're doing. Do you think this is living?" Unexpected tears stung Kate's eyes. "I don't know what else to do. I'm scared, Landon. I'm scared of losing everything." "What if you're already losing everything?" His voice softened, becoming gentle. What if hiding this, suppressing this, is costing more than admitting it? Before Kate could respond, the sound of approaching voices made them step apart quickly. Mike from marketing appeared in the doorway, followed by Jennifer and two clients she didn't recognize. "There you are," Mike said cheerfully, clearly a few drinks past his limit. "We were looking for you two. The clients wanted to congratulate the Patterson team personally." Kate forced herself to smile, hoping her makeup hid any evidence of the emotions swirling inside her. "How wonderful! I'd love to meet them." For the next 20 minutes, she and Landon performed their familiar routine of professional colleagues, discussing strategies and results with practiced precision. But beneath the surface, Kate could feel something shifting, something cracking under the pressure of maintaining the facade. It was when one of the clients, Mr. Harrison, made an innocent comment that everything fell apart. "You two really work well together," he observed, smiling at Kate and Landon. "My wife and I were commenting earlier about the natural chemistry you have. It's rare to see business partners who complement each other so perfectly." Kate felt all the blood drain from her face. Beside her, Landon went very quiet. "Natural chemistry?" Harrison continued, oblivious to the tension he'd created. "The way you anticipate each other's thoughts, finish each other's sentences. It's like watching a couple who've been together for years." The silence that followed was deafening. Kate could see Jennifer and Mike exchanging glances, could feel Landon's eyes on her profile, could practically hear the gears turning in everyone's minds around them. "We work well together," Kate managed to say, her voice sounding strange to her own ears. "More than well," Harrison's wife added with a knowing smile. "Honey, remember when we were like that? That electric connection you just can't hide?" And it was in that moment that Kate realized that the rules they'd established, all the careful precautions, all the efforts to keep their relationship secret, had been useless. Because what they had between them was too powerful to hide. And now, everyone could see it. The silence in Patricia's office the following Monday was so thick that Kate could hear the tick-tock of the antique clock on the shelf, each second marking what she was certain would be the end of her career. She and Landon sat in the same uncomfortable chairs from weeks ago, but this time the tension between them had shifted. It was no longer the barely contained electricity of denied desire, but the quiet solidarity of two people facing consequences together. Patricia studied them for a long moment, her fingers drumming against the desk in a rhythm that mirrored Kate's racing heartbeat. The corporate event had ended 3 days ago, but the shock waves from the Harrisons' innocent observation were still reverberating through the office like an emotional earthquake. "So," Patricia said finally, her voice carefully neutral, "apparently, half the office spent the weekend speculating about you two." Kate opened her mouth to deny it, to manufacture some plausible explanation, but Landon spoke first. "Patricia," he said calmly, "there's something we need to tell you." Kate's heart stopped. They'd agreed to maintain the denial, to insist everything was purely professional. She looked at him in panic, but Landon met her eyes with a determined expression she'd never seen before. "Landon, don't," she began. "Kate." His voice was gentle but firm. "We can't keep pretending." He turned back to Patricia, took a deep breath and continued. "You're right. There is something between us, something that started months ago and that we've been trying to keep separate from our work." Patricia leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "Go on." "It's complicated," Kate said weakly, still trying to process that Landon had just blown up their carefully constructed world. "It's not complicated," Landon corrected gently. "It's simple. We're two professionals who fell in love working together, and we've done everything in our power to ensure it doesn't affect our work or our credibility." The words "fell in love" hung in the air like a confession Kate wasn't prepared to hear, much less have spoken aloud in her supervisor's office. She looked at Landon in shock, seeing vulnerability and determination in equal measure in his dark eyes. "Fell in love?" Patricia repeated, one eyebrow arching. "Yes," Landon said simply, never taking his eyes off Kate. "Completely, irrevocably in love." The air left Kate's lungs in a rush. Neither of them had used that word before, had danced around it through weeks of secret messages and stolen encounters. But hearing it now, coming from Landon in front of Patricia, Kate realized there was a terrifying freedom in finally naming what she felt. "And you, Kate?" Patricia asked gently. Is that how you feel too? Kate looked at Landon, at the man who had turned her orderly life upside down with a misdirected message and months of barely contained sexual tension. The man who challenged her professionally and personally, who made her laugh and drove her crazy in equal measure, who had just risked his own career in this moment to protect hers. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, that's how I feel. Patricia nodded slowly, processing the confession. Well, that explains quite a bit. Kate braced herself for the inevitable. The reprimand, the discussion about company policy, maybe even termination. But Patricia surprised them. You know, she said, leaning forward, in 20 years in this business, I've rarely seen a working partnership as effective as yours. The results you've produced together, the way you complement each other professionally, it's exceptional. Patricia, Kate began. Let me finish. Patricia raised her hand. The company policy on workplace relationships exists for good reasons, but it doesn't prohibit relationships. It requires proper disclosure and professional management. Kate blinked, confused. Disclosure? You're both adults, respected professionals. If you can keep your personal relationship separate from your work, and based on your recent performance, you clearly can, then this is something we can manage. You're saying we won't be fired? Kate asked incredulously. Patricia laughed, a genuine, warm sound. Kate, why would I fire my two most productive consultants for falling in love? That would be poor management. The relief that washed over Kate was so intense, she felt tears sting her eyes. Beside her, Landon reached over and took her hand, the first public physical contact since it all began. There will be conditions, Patricia continued, her tone becoming more businesslike. Formal documentation of the relationship with HR, regular reviews to ensure there's no conflict of interest, and if you two ever break up, she paused meaningfully, it will need to be managed professionally. We understand, Landon said, his fingers squeezing Kate's. Good. Patricia stood, signaling the end of the meeting. I suppose congratulations are in order then. When they left Patricia's office, Kate felt like she was floating. The hallway that had been a minefield of gossip and suspicious glances now seemed different, charged with possibility instead of danger. Are you okay? Landon asked quietly as they walked back to their desks. Kate stopped abruptly and turned to face him, aware of curious glances from colleagues but no longer caring. You said you love me. I did. There was no hesitation in his voice. In front of Patricia, officially. Yes, I did. Why? Kate asked, genuinely curious. Why risk everything like that? Landon smiled, that slow, devastating smile that had made her heart race from day one. Because I stopped being afraid of losing my career and started being afraid of losing you. The simplicity of the statement hit her like lightning. Here was the man who had started as her rival, then become her secret obsession, and finally her salvation. The man who had risked everything for a chance to be with her openly. I love you too, she said, the words coming easier than expected. Completely, irrevocably. Good, Landon murmured, leaning closer. Because I have plans for us. What kind of plans? The kind that involves real dinners instead of coded conversations. The kind that involves introducing you to my family. The kind that involves stopping hiding what we have and starting to build something real. Kate smiled, feeling a bubbling happiness rise in her chest. What about our professional rivalry? Oh, that stays, Landon said with a mischievous grin. We just get to settle our disputes in much more interesting ways now. As they returned to work, side by side, openly, with no more secrets, Kate reflected on how a misdirected message had led to this. How what had started as the worst mistake of her life had become the best thing that ever happened to her. And as she settled at her desk, aware of Landon working just a few feet away, Kate realized that sometimes the best loves begin with the most embarrassing mistakes, especially when you're brave enough to stop fighting them. Sometimes courage isn't about making the right choices. It's about embracing the mistakes that lead us exactly where we needed to be. Kate discovered that a message sent to the wrong person was actually sent to the right person. That the vulnerability she so feared became her greatest strength. And that true love isn't about perfect control, but about the beauty of allowing yourself to be completely seen by someone who challenges you to grow. In the end, she learned that some of the best beginnings are born from our most embarrassing moments, because maybe deep down, our mistakes are just the heart finding a way to be honest when the mind is too busy trying to be perfect. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button, subscribe, and let us know in the comments where you're listening from. And if you felt it was really worth your time, click the Totally Worth It button. Your support makes all the difference and helps us keep bringing you stories like this.